Hey everybody, it's Marriage Moment on Monday, or whatever day you happen to be watching this. And right up front, we just need to say, really sorry about all the flies. We live in the country, and it's fly season, and man, they have invaded our home, so there's probably going to be some flies making an appearance on our video. We're just going to try our best to ignore them unless one flies in my eye, which happened the other day. I had to shoot 8 takes of one daily Devo because of the flies.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're just going to embrace them in this one.
Okay.
If it happens, it happens. We are doing our best to answer some questions that were sent to us. Basically, the idea was, are there any mottos or any foundational truths that you have seen to be helpful in your marriage, your 32-year-long marriage? And we've answered a bunch. And last week we talked about money. And this week we want to talk about the second leading cause of divorce, the second leading cause of crisis in marriage. And that is sex. We're going to talk about sex today. And if that makes you uncomfortable, you're probably not alone. There's a whole lot of Christian people that are very uncomfortable having this talk. And that's probably carrying over into your sex life. If you're uncomfortable even hearing a preacher talk about it, you're probably uncomfortable in your sex life, and that's totally understandable. The church, by and large, for at least the American church, for decades, has made 2 huge mistakes when it comes to the conversation about sex. The first mistake is the church has just been totally silent and tried to avoid having a conversation about sex and giving a biblical perspective about sex altogether. Huge mistake. Being quiet, being silent, because our culture is not.
No.
And our creator is not.
Yeah.
Sex was God's idea. He created it and gave it as a gift. So if God gives us a gift, he also has a plan for it. So the church has made a huge mistake in being quiet about sex. The second mistake the church has made is when it does talk, its big message is no.
Yeah.
Just straight up no. And a lot of Christian people were brought up sex is bad, sex is evil, it's from the devil, and even if you're married, it's just a necessity. It's not something you do for fun. Sex is only for having children, and anything else is just a big fat no. So there's a lot of baggage that the church has allowed into Christian marriage by being silent and by giving the wrong message. And so we want to touch on that just a little bit today. Before we get into it, I will say that we at West Main have taught several Sunday morning series on sex and God's plan for it. You can find those on our website. I don't think they're all on YouTube, but you can find them on our website if that would help you. So let's talk a little bit about sex and what we have found kind of to be the mottos, the foundational truths that have been helpful to us. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so let's start with sex in our marriage is exclusively for the husband and wife. It is not for anyone else in your life. It's the one connection that you have with your spouse that you have with no one else. And I think that makes it holy and special and exclusive.
That is 100% the way God designed it. That sex is for marriage. It's to be enjoyed in a marriage. And it is one of the things that's a good word, exclusively between you and your spouse. And I say it like this a lot, that if you're married, your wife is your only legitimate outlet for sex.
Yeah.
And if you're a woman, then your husband is your only legitimate outlet for sex.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep it in that, use those boundaries, there's a lot to be enjoyed there.
Yeah. So it's obvious we need to just say it's important to our marriage. It's something that helps us stay connected in a way that is actually kind of mysterious, which I think is really cool. I think God did that on purpose.
He did, and that's the word Paul uses in Ephesians, is that sex is a mysterious thing, and it's more than just skin on skin. He says it's bigger than just a skin on skin connection. It's a spiritual connection that God gave us, which is really a great description.
Yeah. So something, when you think about that, we're talking about mottos and things that we've learned over the years, we have definitely lived this one, that our sex life has gone through so many phases You know, when we met, I heard somebody on a podcast talking today about I was Renee version 18 because I was 18 years old when we met and you were 19.
And when we got married, you were version 19 and I was version 20.
You were 20.
Yeah.
And so now we're version 51 and almost 52.
Right.
It's been a long time and we've been through a lot of phases. And so I think when we think about our sex life at version 19 and 20 and all the things that we've gone through to be now at 51 and 52, they are completely different. The picture of that is so different.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's good news because in some ways it's good news because you know you're not always going to be in a season of just a great sex life.
Right.
But there's a new season coming. There's a new version coming. And so if you're in a bad version right now, just hang in there and work on your marriage and you get a new version sooner or later.
Yeah. So I think some practicalities about that are just like a woman, I lived through this. I gave birth 4 times. And when you go through having a child and the dynamics of home changing so much, your life has completely changed. It really does transform a woman. So I think that changed my sex drive and my sex needs and our sex life for sure. You know, all those years that the kids were young, we were exhausted and we had to make time, special time to be together and sometimes find a different place, get into a different pace so that we could have some time carved out for each other.
Let's stop there real quick because I think, you know, a lot of the couples that watch this are younger couples with, you know, starting families or kind of established families. And I think it's important to say that it's a huge mistake to let your kids ruin your sex life.
Yeah.
And I know, we know how hard it is when schedules are so crammed full of stuff and you're busy all the time, but you can't let that be an excuse to ruin your sex life. You just can't.
Yeah, and so if that means you have to save up a little bit of your extra money for the month and you go get a hotel room and get a babysitter, that's okay.
Right.
It's something that it's time well spent.
Amanda provides date night once a month.
That's
There's
once
an opportunity.
A month. There you go. So just some things like that just have changed. I mean, it's just part of life. Sometimes we go through, you know, one of us gets sick, somebody has to have surgery, just because of the age, the drive for sex has changed. And so I think you have to just understand that it's like the seasons. It's going to be some different phases that you're going to go through and maybe look back on the past if you've been married for a while and see what phase are we in right now and what needs to change and what has changed, and just understand that instead of saying, well, I wish it was like it used to be, maybe celebrate what it is now because you know each other really well.
Yeah. So, you know, just living together and being married and staying married, there's going to be changes that just happen out of your control. And when we're talking about our sex life, there's going to be changes in everything you just talked about. And so the most important thing by far you can possibly do in your sex life is what?
Have it.
Okay, what's the second most important thing?
Have it often, and then ongoing communication.
It is so critical. If you want a healthy, satisfying, fulfilling sex life in your marriage, it won't happen unless you're willing to communicate about it. And the worst time to communicate about your sex life is when you're having sex.
Yeah.
You have to have that conversation outside of the bedroom and outside of arousal. You have to have that conversation in a different time, in a different place.
Yeah,
and it's not a once a year conversation.
No.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, and so it doesn't have to be face-to-face talking.
Right.
In fact, we've had some really good success over the past several years, just kind of keeping an open email to each other, and we can go back and read as many times as we would like to, and I can go back and read from a really long time ago that we started those emails. And I think sometimes in writing, even if it was like notes that you wrote, being able to go back and read it again and really be able to express what you're trying to say and have some time to think that over, that one has been really successful for us. But somebody else might need to have, some other way
Right,
of
face to
communicating.
face, or write a letter, or a text, or a phone call, or a FaceTime call. Figure it out.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about it, it will never get better, ever.
Yeah.
So you have to communicate about it. So let's talk about some practical application as far as communication about your sex life. And we're not endorsing this book yet because we haven't finished it. We've only read a few chapters, but dang, the first couple are really good.
They are good.
And we're going to give you a little bit of practical stuff from chapter 3. This book is called Marriage Be Hard. And chapter 3 is Sex Be Hard. Because if you don't communicate about it, there can be a lot of dysfunction. And so one of their suggestions, which I really found to be insightful, was the stoplight method. And that you need to have a communication about what sexual behavior and sexual activities are green light for each of you, what sexual activities and behavior are red light for each of you. Those are pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And then what is a yellow light that needs to be continually talked about.
Right. Something that you're not sure you're comfortable with, but you might be willing
But you
in
know
the
it's
future.
probably not a red light either.
Right. That's really good because
It
that
is.
just
It's
is so practical.
It's very practical, and that's a good place to start. If this is a conversation that's difficult for you to have, this is a great place to start. Just make a list. Here are my green lights, and then share them with your spouse.
Yeah.
See what they say. It's a great place to start.
So good.
Yeah. And then the second thing they did, I found really helpful, and I want to start this list, and that is the accelerators, things that hit the accelerator and things that hit the brakes.
Yeah, so it's basically what turns you on and what really turns you off.
Yeah, and they were so practical and so real.
Yeah.
And let me just read you a couple because I think they're super helpful. Like she said, one of the breaks for her was body odor. Like you gotta take a shower, dude. You have to smell good. That makes perfect sense to me. Another one of her breaks was lack of closeness outside the bedroom. You were talking about that earlier. That intimacy for a woman is different than intimacy for a man.
Yeah. So for a man, it's the act of having sex
Right.
is intimacy.
Right.
For a woman, it's that time spent together and that we're talking and that we feel close, and then that just makes sex even more intimate.
Yeah.
So
And I love that one of her hit the brakes was a dirty house.
yeah, because you're so overwhelmed already. And that's very true for young
Yeah,
moms.
for sure. Her accelerators were closeness and feeling her own self-confidence, erotic talk throughout the day. They're just so practical.
Yeah.
And then his were pretty much every man's nakedness, lingerie, days of the week, empty house, full house. And his breaks were being musty myself, smelling bad himself, and recent pooping. So
That's very real.
it's a very real conversation. And here's another good place for you to start.
Yeah.
You don't have to call it accelerators or brakes, but you call it whatever you want it. But make a list. Here are the things that push my buttons, and here are the things that do not. And get very real and
Yeah.
have that conversation. If you can write those down and share them and start a conversation.
Yeah, and this is just another side of being a student of your spouse, because if your marriage is your most important, most valuable possession, you do things like this. You learn, you study, and you ask questions and you communicate.
Yeah.
So something that we've talked about over the whole span of our marriage moments is adding some fun in whenever you can. And so I think this is something that we've done really well over the last several years, just adding some fun into this part of our marriage, our sex life, and just adding some variety. Like we try to take a vacation, a fun vacation, not a mission trip, a fun vacation
Right.
together where we can just get out of this same place and get out of a rut. And
Change
that
of
always,
pace, change of place.
it always helps our sex life. And then just little things like fun lighting, candles, and just some different things that you can find that you can order that are fun, things that we wear, just adding some fun that gives some variety that I think is really helpful, especially if you find yourself in a rut or in a crisis. And we did say we wanted to touch on if somebody's watching and they are already in a place of crisis, or maybe they have stopped having sex.
Sexless marriages are very common.
So where do they even begin if they're listening to us and they would like to make a change?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you could do. And first of all, if you're not praying about it, you better.
Yeah.
Second, we've got some resources we could help you with, so you're welcome to contact us. I would certainly, if possible, reach out to a counselor.
Yeah.
Maybe your problem is a physical problem. Call your doctor and start there.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, in every area of life, if it's dysfunctional or broken, you find some way to fix it, and usually that's to call an expert or to find a doctor or to find somebody who's skilled and licensed and understands that whole concept. So
Yeah.
bottom line is get help if you need it.
Yeah, it's important enough in our marriage that we need to fight for it, and we need to do everything we can to fix when we find out there's a problem.
Yep. Well, to the two of you that are still watching this awkward video, thank you for taking the time to watch it. We would love to have this conversation personally with you if that's something you need, because it's a hard thing.
Yeah.
I think we're done with all the questions that were asked on the little text. I'll go back and check them, but I think we're going to continue reading this book and come back with some more conversations about marriage would be hard and give us some practical things from there. Thanks for watching. We'd love it if you would like and subscribe. See you later.
Bye.